All right, we're going to talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and the Breakfast Club. What could be more fun? What could be more fitting than a guy who's basically close to death going to a hip hop show and talking about politics to a bunch of out of touch celebrities that are basically pretending to represent Black America to the rest of the country? Okay, that's just my opinion, but really, I want to ask, do you really think that the key to going and getting the black vote is through Charlemagne, is through the other idiot that's on the show, DJ Envy? You know, those guys are basically, most of their job is, talking crap about people like Meta World Peace and Tekashi 69. Yet they seem to get all these great interviews with these political figures, and usually those political figures bomb those interviews. Well, maybe they have something that I have to grant. Maybe they have a point. Maybe those are the real incisive political commentators. So let's get right into it.
You should love Nina Turner. Nina Nina worked with me in 2016. We started an organization after the campaign. It's called Our Revolution. Mm-hmm. And the function of Our Revolution is to get people all over this country to stand up, to fight back, to run for office. Nina has, until just a few days ago, been the leader of Our Revolution. They have 600 chapters all over the country, all right? And they are getting people to get involved in the political process. Ro Khanna, you may know. Ro is one of the outstanding members of the Congress. Carmen Yolene Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, is one of our co-chairs. Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's. So we have.
Okay, what's the point of this discussion right now? So, if you notice, people are very paranoid right now about appearing diverse, even though diversity doesn't really matter. So, Bernie Sanders has hired for his campaign as one of the co-chairs the woman who was in charge of the recovery effort in Puerto Rico in 2017 after the hurricanes. This is a woman who basically hid most of the aid that was distributed there, and a lot of it just went to waste and whatever. That's the person who he's hired to be a co-chair of his campaign. And it says here, this is from October. This is from USA Today. It's not from Breitbart, and it's not from Conservative Treehouse. It says FBI agents raided municipal offices in San Juan, Puerto Rico on Tuesday, seizing documents and digital records as part of an investigation into fraud allegations related to the city government. Special agent in charge Doug Leff said federal investigators are also looking into potential obstruction of the investigation. According to Leff, agents believe documents tied to the reported irregularities in the city's purchasing procedures might have been taken from the building or falsified. Now, it doesn't say whether she is a target of the investigation, but if this is if they discover that her incompetence and possibly corruption had an effect on that aid effort, then why would he hire her for the campaign? The reason he's hiring her for the campaign is because Bernie Sanders actually didn't do well among Latino voters in 2016. In fact, that was one of the areas where he wasn't really doing very well at all. People don't really talk about that.
We have a diverse group of co-chairs we're going to be announcing. We have Faz Shakir, who is the first Muslim ever to be the campaign manager.
What about your press secretary? They said he's in.
So before we get to this, which they'll bring up again, Fayez Shakir, he's bringing up diversity again, even though what the hell does the diversity gain you? Black Americans have their interests, according to the left, that are different from those of Puerto Ricans, that are different than those of Muslims. And Fayez Shakir works for the Center for American Progress, which is a centrist, establishment think tank, and I've written about this in the latest piece. It's an establishment think tank of the Democratic Party. So where is Bernie exactly bringing his diversity from. He's bringing it from the establishment of the Democratic Party. He's not bringing it from grassroots activists. If you could make the argument, by the way, if he wanted to, diversify the party, why not bring in grassroots activists from the Puerto Rican community, the Muslim community, the black community? But these are not people who are from grassroots activists. Nina Turner, of course, is a former state senator. She was my state senator. So I wouldn't say she's establishment, but I would say that you're not talking about bringing diversity from the grassroots here, as he did in 2016. I think back then you could have said that Nina Turner was making a turn for the grassroots effort.
An illegal immigrant.
She's
an illegal immigrant.
Well, she's protected under DACA right now.
Yeah, we'll have DACA people, but we'll announce some other people pretty soon. It's going to be a diverse campaign staff, and this is a promise. This is maybe my first campaign promise. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. When you look at Trump's cabinet, looks kind of white and kind of old, right?
Kind of.
Absolutely.
Kind of.
So they're kind of white and kind of old. You have two people of color, at least three people of color. You have Alex Acosta, who's Cuban. You have Ben Carson, who's black, and you have Elaine Chao, who's Chinese. So they're basically claiming that those people are white. This is, again, every progressive person, whether they're a minority or white person, considers people who are not progressive to be white people because they don't have any real way to back up their beliefs. When you show them numbers, they start to yell about diversity and garbage like that doesn't matter. And if you think that that's not true, watch the entire interview, and the entire focus is on race and diversity.
Kind of.
It's like a cabinet of mayonnaise.
Okay. Our cabinet will look like America in terms of women and men and racial diversity. That's the point.
Now, Senator Sanders, a lot of people say you didn't really lose the Democratic nomination. It got stolen from you the first time around. Do you believe it got stolen from you?
Well, let's just say this. Let's just say that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was not overly sympathetic to our candidacy. Let's just say that they were.
This is Bernie being a pussy, which is the best. It's basically the only thing that he's excelled at. This is the only area of life where Bernie Sanders is really giving his all at, being a fucking pussy. That's who he is. He should have, you're now running for the nomination again. Okay, how else can we take this to be beyond bending over and taking it again from the DNC? See, like a person with real self-respect would have turned his back on them back in 2016, said, I'm not cooperating with the party anymore. I'm going to run on my own platform with my own organization. And instead, he's basically bowed his head like the pussy that he is for 2020.
Represented the establishment. We took on. Let's just say that before the first vote was cast in the 2016 primary election in a caucus in Iowa, my opponent, Secretary Clinton, had 500 superdelegates lined up before the first vote was cast.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Over the last couple of years, we've worked hard on some of those issues. There will no longer be superdelegates voting on the first ballot at the convention, which means that now delegates will actually represent the people in their states, and there will not be a lot of powerful insiders having undue influence.
So essentially what he's papering over is the fact that if he does not win a clear majority of the delegates in the in the primaries, he can't win unless the superdelegates decide to back him on the second vote. Bernie Sanders, or in order to guarantee that he would get the nomination, he can't just get the most number of delegates. He has to win a majority. And look how many candidates there are now. It's basically become a cloud of locusts. You have all these people like Inslee and Hickenlooper, and Sherrod Brown might enter the race, and Joe Biden might enter the race, and you have Kamala Harris. It is going to be a mess. It is going to be carnage trying to get this nomination through, and the superdelegates are going to come into play. So Bernie Sanders is not telling the whole story here.
They say what everybody wants to hear. Free tuition, lower taxes, legalizing marijuana. But what's the plan? How are we going to have?
I don't
free
say
tuition?
Lower taxes.
Oh, okay. Well, how are we going to have free tuition?
I'll tell you
How are we going to do?
So the one thing he objects to is when they say, well, lower taxes. Of course, I'm not going to lower taxes. Okay, so everybody thinking, well, he's only going to tax the rich. No, he said he's not going to lower taxes, period. Okay, so if you're paying more taxes, if you're paying taxes now, you're going to be either paying the same amount or you're going to be paying more. Okay, now he does clarify what he means in the following sequence. Okay, and you can choose to believe him or you can choose to believe everyone else, but here we go.
Do healthcare for all? How are we going to implement those plans?
Excellent question. Fair enough. Right now, in terms of healthcare, we are spending almost twice as much per capita as any other major country on earth. And when you come and you visit me in Burlington, Vermont, if you go 50 miles north of where I live, you're in Quebec, Canada, okay? They guarantee in Canada health care. Do you know how much it costs? You got, God forbid, somebody comes down with cancer, right? You go through all the surgery, all the chemotherapy. Do you know how much you pay in Canada for all of that?
Free.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's not free. It's paid for the same way we pay for public education.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
You don't come out with a nickel bill. I think that's the right thing to be.
I agree.
Okay. So you ask me how we pay for it. Right now, we are paying twice as much per capita for health care as they do in Canada because they don't have a system which enables the drug companies and the insurance companies to make huge profits. Their system is simpler. There is not all kinds of waste and bureaucracy.
A lot of overcharging here.
A lot of it.
Huge amount. So to answer your question in terms of health care, we're already paying for it. We're paying twice as much as the Canadians. So what the criticism of Bernie Sanders is, he's going to raise your taxes. Well, I may. That's right. But you know what I'm doing? I'm doing away with all of your private health insurance premiums. All right, I don't know how you guys work it, where you get your health care from. Somebody is paying for it. Somebody's paying Blue Cross or United Health. All right, that's gone.
We're paying it for ourselves yet.
You're paying it for yourself. How much are you paying? If you're an average family of four in this country, you're paying $28,000 a year. And that cost is going to go up. So we can't afford the present system. That's why we're going to move to Medicare for all. That's how we're going to pay for it. You ask about public colleges and universities.
So there you go. This is Bernie Sanders' fake economics. Okay, his whole premise is that if you increase taxes on Wall Street and on higher income individuals, therefore you will get that revenue that you need in order to fully fund a public health insurance scheme. Okay? Or public health insurance model. But a scheme doesn't mean anything bad, by the way. So anyway, this is a misunderstanding of human nature. Because an investor, a Wall Street investor, if he's being taxed at a higher rate, he might sit on more of his capital. And that's called hoarding on the left. The left says, well, they're hoarding their resources. Well, it could go beyond hoarding. He could end up offshoring his resources or her resources to some place like, one of those island paradises like Bermuda. You put your resources there. You could offshore those resources to Switzerland, which will never, ever, ever become Switzerland is never going to be a place where you can just recover people's assets. Okay, if Bernie Sanders thinks that he's going to get people to pay more into the system, he's wrong, because people are just going to invest less. You're going to be getting less you're going to be getting less revenue because people are going to be performing fewer transactions. That's the flaw of people thinking, well, we're going to tax the rich more. Well, the rich have ways of sequestering their assets. Then when you're going to get into the notion of taxing their holdings, you're going to get mass capital flight, and the country will probably literally fall apart. Their holdings, taxing their holdings, you're going to get mass capital flight, and the country will probably literally fall apart, and we'll see some sort of dystopian future here.
But criminal justice reform is a huge issue for me.
Do you feel like you would be righting a wrong because you did sign the 94 crime bill?
I signed it, I voted for
You
it.
voted for it.
Yeah.
We voted for the 94 crime bill, which started a lot of this mass incarceration.
I voted for that because for a couple of reasons. I mean, one of the things, it's a fair question, but as you know, a lot of bills have a lot of stuff in it. And if I hadn't voted for that, you would be saying to me, how come you voted against the Violence Against Women Act? How come you voted against the effort to deal with some gun safety legislation, which was included in that? That was a ban, as I recall, on banning assault weapons, something that I believed in. So it was, but if you also noticed, at exactly that period, I talked about the dangers of mass incarceration. So it was one of those, and it happens. It may happen tomorrow. You got a bill which has some bad stuff in it, has some good stuff. You make your choice.
So you feel like you'd be right and wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is an issue we've got to deal with. Too many lives are being destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people get criminal records. You know why? Because they have smoked marijuana. They got caught with marijuana. That's insane. And as you know, this is a racial issue in the sense that if I think blacks and whites do marijuana at about equal time. Blacks get arrested a hell of a lot more. And what we also want to do, and some communities are beginning to do this, is expunge the records of people who are arrested for marijuana. I believe in that very strongly.
So this is the Bernie Sanders that he blocks the real racial problem, which is that we make it out that the mass incarceration is a black problem. So we had to go and deal with this crime wave of the 90s with the Clinton crime bill. I forgot what it was called, along with the assault weapons ban. Okay, so essentially what he's saying is, well, we had to put a lot of people, black people supposedly, in prison, which, yes, he's correct, and Charlatan is correct that the Clinton crime bill disproportionately affected minority people. Because the fact is that in a lot of these cities that happen to be populated with a lot of those people, there were gang members and they were rounded up and put in prison for a long time. Okay? You can take your own position on that. I don't really have a strong feeling either way. But they're saying in order to do that, why did I have to do that? He's saying because, remember, there was the assault weapons ban. I needed to keep assault weapons out of the hands of those dang white people, those dang rednecks and school shooters and all that, those evil people that, they're basically lunatics that you can't control them. So this is the politics of fear. Talking about assault weapons bans, when in reality, for those of you that don't know, what happened with Columbine, for example, and a number of other school shootings that happened in the country. In fact, I'll try to put a link to an article I wrote last year for the Hard News Network. There were rifles that were excluded under the assault weapons ban that were used in Columbine. The high .9mm rifle was directly designed. It was a poor quality rifle, but it was used in that shooting because it was excluded under the assault weapons ban. Therefore, there was no law against it. So essentially what Bernie Sanders is doing is that he's saying I supported a bill that put a lot of black people in prison, according to everybody, and I agree with him too, because I had to act on gun violence by supporting a bill that didn't really eliminate gun crime. Do you realize how ridiculous that is? It's almost as if the man is saying, I need to give a bad solution for one problem and I have to apologize to you guys because I screwed you in the process.
I see you talked the other day about your tax returns. Why are people so into your tax returns, and why haven't you released it? I know you said your wife does your taxes, and she hasn't necessarily got to it yet. First of all, haven't you released it yet, and why are people so into your tax returns?
That's a good question, because it's a gotcha kind of question. We will release them. I mean, the answer is they will be. We're a normal family, and I'm a senator, but in 10 years, somebody said to you, can you tomorrow get your 10 years of tax returns? Not so easy. So we're doing it, and it will come out very soon. and it will not be any great shocks. I don't have any investments in Russia. There is not a Sanders Tower in Moscow that we're working on. Nothing in Saudi Arabia. It'll be mostly a Senate salary. And I wrote a book, made some money on the book. You'll see that there.
But I mean, that's why you can't drag your feet on it, because that's what they gave Trump flack for.
Yeah, but believe me, we ain't Trump, and we'll be on.
Now, does Bernie Sanders? This is a question.
So this is another area where I think Sanders is dodging the real question. Okay, the tax returns issues. I have a different theory about why he wouldn't release his tax returns. But let's talk about what he's using here as his dodge. He's saying, well, I don't have a tower in Moscow. I don't have investments in Saudi Arabia. Well, there is no tower in Moscow. First of all, I think if the Moscow tower thing were actually, had actually been fulfilled with Donald Trump, then yeah, you could have seen something like that on his tax return or something. In the event, I think that the only thing that we could have seen is a write-off, because he may have deposited some money in Russia in order as a fee in order to begin negotiation for it. In some cases, for example, if you remember in history, in football history, Al Davis of the Raiders, he got this massive deposit from the city of Irwindale in California. I think it was a $10 million deposit, because he wanted to negotiate a new stadium there, and they said, well, $10 million deposit. That's possible. That I could, it's possible that Russia gave him a $10 million deposit towards his building of a tower in Russia, or the other way around. It could have been that they demanded a deposit from him, and he ended up spending $10 million over there. That's something about Trump. Now, what does that have to do with Bernie? What I think he's really doing here, and I'm not saying that this is true, I'm saying that this is my impression, and I can be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'm just saying at the moment that this is just speculation. I think he does have a number of investments in Wall Street, and he wouldn't want that to show up during the campaign and have people say, well, you're campaigning against Wall Street so strong. Why is it that you're not disclosing your investments in Wall Street? Okay, if it shows that he has, all these stock investments or whatever, that would be a kind of a blow to him, because a lot of his supporters would see that as not living up to his own.
American communities, and the youth unemployment rate is still unbelievably high. And you tell me, please tell me, what happens if you're a kid who drops out of high school who has no money?
You're probably going to turn into a life of crime.
You got it.
Yeah.
What a waste. What a waste. So, we got to invest in those things. We'll invest in housing. A lot of people in the African-American community not making a lot of money, spending 50% of their income in housing, childcare.
We got to change that.
Okay, so he brings up here the issue of fair housing and the minimum wage. Now, I went and looked at this, and I know a lot of people on the left, you're not going to like the American Enterprise Institute, but they did this study on February 19th, and they said New York City's minimum wage hike to $15 an hour is causing pain for many of the city's restaurants. And it says here, this is from the New York Eater, which is a trade magazine, which I have pulled up. Restaurateurs are scrambling to cut service and raise prices after the minimum wage hike. Okay, so this is not from a biased political news source. This is from a trade magazine for the restaurant industry, and they're saying basically some companies are looking to nix more than $500,000 from costs in order to budget. And it goes through a number of issues here. It says it's one sacrifice the Mexican chain, which is the one they're examining, Rosa's, has made to help offset the additional $600,000 that Governor Andrew Cuomo's minimum wage increases will cost them this year. The changes, announced on November 10th, 2015, as part of a gradual growth, brought wages up to about their cap on December 31st, representing a minimum wage hike from $13 to $15 per hour for businesses in New York City with more than 11 employees. Tipped employees' hourly wage also rose from $8.65 to $10, with a tip credit that guarantees they'll receive at least $15 per hour, and the changes extended to workers on salary. The overtime exemption rate rose to $1,125 per week in New York City, or $58,500 annually. By the way, in my first job out of college, I didn't make nearly, I think I made $55,000. And they want a waitress to make that much. Granted, it's New York City where things cost more, but it costs more because of things like this. You know, this is what's so ridiculous, that I was basically a line cook for many years. I was a line cook and I was a cashier. I started out making $5 an hour. At a certain, I think the most I ended up making was $8.75 an hour. And now they're trying to say, well, these are jobs that should be paying a livable wage. Well, in my first job out of college, I didn't make nearly, I think I made $55,000. And they want a waitress to make that much. Granted, it's New York City where things cost more, but it costs more because of things like this. You know, this is what's so ridiculous, that I was basically a line cook for many years. I was a line cook and I was a cashier. I started out making $5 an hour. At a certain, I think the most I ended up making was $8.75 an hour. And now they're trying to say, well, these are jobs that should be paying a livable wage. They don't pay a livable wage because they're not thought of as professions. Most people use these jobs in order to get into the workforce. They're usually, you know, I started when I was 15, and, you know, it was my way of breaking into the workforce, and I wasn't intending to stay there. And this is why Bernie Sanders, when he complains about how there's so much youth unemployment, well, there's youth unemployment because of policies like yours, Bernie. If you're going to have higher minimum wage, you're going to have fewer restaurants and fewer minimum wage paying jobs that are going to be hiring people. And you're going to have more youth unemployment. That's automatic. So anyway, this is the end of the first part. We're going to go into some of the other issues that Bernie Sanders covered in part 2. So stay tuned. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the bell and subscribe to me on BitChute and on GabMinds.com. I'll talk to you guys later.